Cyrus. We had a program at the public high school on the south side of Chicago called Adopt a Freshman. This linked do-gooder teachers like me with kids who really needed extra support of all kinds. My adoptive son was Cyrus. Cyrus was already enrolled in my freshman social studies class, but he hardly ever came to school. The first task was to improve his attendance. I started leaving my apartment an hour earlier each morning to pick up Cyrus from the projects where he lived. Although I started to get used to it, my first trip to the high-rise complex was shocking. I parked my beat-up car on the street. One of the four doors of my 15-plus-year-old used Chevy was smashed in and didn't open. I figured my car wouldn't attract much attention in that neighborhood. Surprisingly, I didn't attract much attention either. Maybe professional-looking white women around there were assumed to be teachers or social workers or something. But other than a nod from a uniformed police officer, few of the people walking around at 6:30 a.m. even looked at me. The outside of the building reminded me a little of a hotel, except with a lot more floors and a lot more graffiti. What seemed like a hotel was the way the apartments were approached from an outside corridor instead of an inside corridor like I was used to. But the biggest difference was the chain-linked fence running along the entire length of the building. It was there to protect children from falling over the railing. However, it gave me the feeling of being fenced in, like a prisoner in a cage. Cyrus's apartment was dark, of course, since everybody was still sleeping. Cyrus would answer the door after a few of my persistent but quiet knocks. The ratty blanket on the floor of the living room was obviously where Cyrus had slept. An adult woman with a baby was sleeping on the couch. A small child still slept on the other side of the couch. In a little room adjacent to the living room was a twin bed with 4 more children. 2 were at the head, 2 were sleeping at the foot. Another bedroom had a closed door. Mom was in there, often with some guy. I sat on one of the wooden kitchen chairs and waited for Cyrus to iron a crease in his black dress code pants. He'd dig up a white dress code shirt from a pile of clothes on the floor. Some of the kids were starting to get up by then, since Cy made so much noise. "Where's my ID? Where's my shoes?" I bought him a few more white shirts and black pants over the months, hoping that it would speed up the process of finding one in the morning. "Maybe you could iron the night before, Cyrus. Maybe you could iron a few at a time? Wouldn't make no difference. It'd still look the same by morning." With all these little kids playing around, I figured it was true. Eventually, he'd have himself together enough to head out with me for school. Sometimes we'd barely arrive on time. Of course, on the best days, we would get to school early enough for Cyrus to get his free breakfast. I'd drop him off at the line to go through security and the metal detectors, and then run to my classroom. I had no pre-class prep time and got used to fighting the crowds to my 3rd-floor room and unlock the door while students were waiting in the hallway. I wouldn't see Cyrus again until my class. Sometimes, if he wasn't there, it was because he got in trouble with another teacher before my fourth period when he should be with me. Since I had lunch fifth, I'd go to the discipline office to find out the story, first from Cyrus, then I'd read the write-up and talk with the dean. Occasionally, I'd get him out of minor trouble with a promise from Cyrus to apologize to a teacher for what was usually an inappropriate smart mouth. There were times, however, that I would go to Cyrus's crib in the morning, and instead of seeing the tall 14-year-old Cyrus answer the door, the much smaller 8-year-old would appear. "Cy ain't here," the barefooted boy would say while rubbing his eyes. I stopped asking where he was, or how that was possible for Cyrus not to be there. Once Cyrus wanted to talk to me after class. He told me he was in trouble, that it burns when I pee. Yikes, Cyrus, when did that start? This morning a little, then during the day. We didn't have a nurse at the school, even though these 1,800 or more students sure needed one. All right, meet me here after school. I'll take you to the clinic. He just had a minor infection, but on the way, I asked him if it was possible he had a sexually transmitted disease. He told me maybe from one of the hoes he had done it with gave him something. He couldn't remember how many girls he had done it with. After 10, he couldn't really keep track anymore. Although he wasn't basketball player tall, he still looked a little older than 14, but really not much older. While we were at the clinic, I asked for some free condoms from one of the nurses. She gave me a strip of about 6. I asked for another and got another strip. I finally asked another clinician who wanted to know what I was up to. I explained that I was a teacher and brought one of my students there. She gave me a paper bag stuffed with condoms. I decided to keep some of the condoms at school, figuring there might be another need to distribute some. I gave Cyrus about 10 strips of them. As I drove Cyrus home, I asked him if he ever used one before. Thankfully, he said he had, and we both laughed our heads off at our mutual relief that I wasn't going to have to explain how to use it. I really liked Cyrus. He has a comfortable presence and is easy to be around. Some kids are like pulling teeth to get them to give you a yes or no answer to the most guided questions. Not Cyrus. He was perceptive and liked to talk. He'd do most of the talking when we were driving, and we laughed a lot together. My car had the tendency to not want to start when the air was too humid. Living in Chicago, that was most days. I kept a wire hanger in the back seat, so when the car wouldn't start, I was ready to pop the hood, unscrew the cover on the air filter where the butterfly valve to the carburetor was exposed. The wire hanger, with the hanger part straightened out, could hold open the choke and let the car turn over. Cyrus and I became an efficient team and had the procedure down pat so well that if the car died at a red light, we would have the whole process finished with Cyrus buckled back in next to me before the light turned green. Otherwise, we'd both scream back at the honking horns, "Just a minute!" We laughed a lot. I started getting concerned when Cyrus wasn't around for nearly a week. I started asking other kids at school if they knew where he was. I got a hot tip to check out the intersection near Marquette Park. The next morning, when Cyrus wasn't home again, I decided to drive around Marquette Park looking for him. Sure enough, I saw him there. "Cyrus, Get in this car. Dang, if I didn't sound like a real parent. No, Miz Coldwater. I said get in here now. All right, let's get out of here. Of course, the car died. Cyrus seemed genuinely pissed off as we went through our familiar routine to get the car started again. I think it died again, too. We both hated it when that would happen. You really shouldn't be over here, Miz Coldwater. Yeah, well, I could say the same thing to you, Cyrus. I think it was the quietest ride we ever had together. When we got to the school and parked, Cyrus told me, I can't go in there today, Miz Coldwater. What do you mean, Cyrus? I can't get past the security. They'd lock me up for sure. Oh. I didn't know what to say. Did he have a weapon? Drugs? Probably both. During spring break, Cyrus was picked up on weapons and possession charges. Since it was a violation of his probation, he had to go to juvenile detention. I was really sad, but a little relieved too. I thought he'll probably have a bed to sleep in there. Cyrus wrote to me once, and in it thanked me for all I had done for him that year. He said he was really sorry he didn't listen to all of my advice. I wrote him back and told him to study hard and try to find ways to get something good out of the situation he was in now. The detention center wasn't far from where I went to college. I thought of how nice it was to be outside the city, where you could see the stars at night and hear the crickets chirping. I would fantasize about Cyrus in a camp environment with fresh air and exercise. Cyrus didn't write back again. I hope he's doing okay.